Persian Gulf area to get the job done, and it was done relatively quickly, and then the U.S. pulled out, did not go into Iraq itself, pulled out, got the job done, and at that point, as David Bergen was pointing out, the president was extremely...
That is CNN's Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer is in Buenos Aires, and obviously there's some technical issues there. We'll get Wolf back up. Wolf explaining the foreign policy expertise of this particular president of George H.W. Bush. As Douglas Brinkley pointed out, that will be his legacy, just how well he handled foreign policy. And because he was a man who was quiet, calm, and reserved, he didn't like to brag about his accomplishments in that way. I want to bring back in David Bergen, who's a presidential advisor, to pick up on what Wolf Blitzer was talking about. We have to remember that during that time, David, there was the first Gulf War that we dealt with, Operation Desert Shield, which became Operation Desert Storm. But then, it lasted for less than a month, from January 16, 1991 to February 27th of 1991, where the U.S. declared victory in Iraq. I'm wondering how much that had to do with the outcome of that particular election.
Well, there are two things I think that from a policy standpoint stand out, and we can move to the politics of it, that were, I think, particularly instructive for how to handle foreign policy well and be successful at it. The first was that before he committed the United States to go in and kick Saddam Hussein out, he formed an international coalition of the willing. Jim Baker, the Secretary of State, traveled all across much of the world to bring nations together to support that effort and also to help pay for it. And at the end of the day, the United States actually made money. I mean, by the time everybody paid their bills, we actually went up in the black, which never happened. But the important thing was to have the coalition, because it gave moral force to the notion of, why Saddam, it was legal to kick Saddam out of there. But the other thing that was extremely important, and because it was not a lesson that was followed by his son necessarily, and that was when we knocked Saddam out of Kuwait, and he started retreating, his forces were retreating back in toward Baghdad. There was a lot of pressure from some of the junior people around George H.W. Bush to go into Iraq and go after them, to topple Saddam Hussein right there. And Bush refused. He was very restrained about it, and he did it for two reasons. One, he didn't like the idea of shooting soldiers in the back as they were retreating. But very, very importantly, he had made a commitment to the Saudis and to others that once we kicked Saddam out of Kuwait, we would not follow him into Iraq. And George Bush was a man of his word, and that's why people trusted him and why he commanded so much respect, because he didn't want to break the promise to those countries, even though there was this building pressure. And that made a big difference in how later presidents, for example, Barack Obama himself made it very clear when he came into the office that one of the men he most respected was George H.W. Bush in the way he conducted foreign policy. He very much respected Brent Scowcroft, who was his national security advisor. And those lessons were passed from one president to another in a very, very successful way. And I think, again, George H.W. Bush deserves a lot of credit for doing that. It did not give him the political victory that he expected. He assumed that the country would be grateful. He didn't go out and try to sell it hard. He was bashful about that. And he just never got he didn't get the votes from voters. They wanted to move on to other things. But nonetheless, as Brinkley said, it does go down in the books as a highly successful foreign policy, and one that continues to be a model for today's world. And we ought to be paying a lot more attention to it, frankly, than we do.
Well said. I want you to stand by, David Bergen. More on the life of George Herbert Walker Bush now from our Jamie Gangel.
So help me God. Congratulations.
George H.W. Bush may have sat in the Oval Office for just 4 years, but his legacy will last for generations. In foreign policy,
this will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait.
Bush's coalition building during Desert Storm was unprecedented, uniting nearly 40 countries and ending the conflict in a matter of weeks, a playbook for all presidents that followed.
If you want to know how to fight a war, take a look at the way George Bush fought the first Gulf War.
The Cold War ended on his watch, without a shot taken or a bomb dropped.
He didn't gloat because it would not be in his nature to gloat at someone else's misfortune.
That same diplomatic restraint also shown when the Iron Curtain collapsed.
On the day the Berlin Wall came down, we all went over to the Oval Office to tell President Bush that he had to go to Berlin.
You wanted to.
I wanted him to go to Berlin.
And he said,
what would I do? Dance on the wall? He said, this is a German moment. I thought, the President of the United States, to step back, this is a German moment.
I think he deserves credit for getting the world off in the right direction at the end of the Cold War. The Cold War being over was not an excuse to pack up and go home. It was an excuse to build a new world of cooperation. Time will prove that he was right in wanting an integrated, cooperative world of strong security, but lots of freedom, lots of democracy, lots of interaction between people.
On the domestic front, Bush is credited for making improvements to the Clean Air Act and signing the Americans with Disabilities Act, critical legislation that revolutionized access for millions, including Bush himself, when he suffered from Parkinson's in his final years.
Dr. Liberty, I think, holds my grandfather up in a hero. He wasn't their likely hero. You know, they have all these big kind of liberal advocates that advocated for their movement. But my grandfather's the guy who got it done. It's not just through things like wheelchair access, but it's changing the culture of how people with disabilities, you know, can shine and let their abilities shine and have jobs in places where they might not have jobs. So I think that's an awesome legacy.
Another legacy, many will remember Bush for this.
Just because you're an old guy, you don't have to sit around drooling in the corner. Get out and do something. Get out and enjoy life.
Bush did just that, jumping over and over and over again, even for his 90th birthday.
I think the reason he did it is because he's got a young heart, and that it's the thrill of the jump. And once he did it the first time, it became a natural for the next 4 or 5 times.
And while Bush 41 disliked the word dynasty, no question he was thrilled
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
when his oldest son became the 43rd President of the United States.
He felt a sense of pride, and I was grateful for that. I was happy that he was happy.
Did he give you any advice?
No. And he was very guarded about giving me advice unless I asked for it.
But for many, Bush 41 will long be remembered for what he did after the White House.
The family legacy isn't about who's president or first lady or governor. The family legacy is the legacy of service.
He turned a campaign vision into a post-presidential mission statement.
I want a kinder and gentler nation, like 1,000 points of light in a broad and peaceful sky.
That call prompted millions to volunteer. And Bush and wife Barbara did their part too, helping to raise an estimated $1 billion for charity.
It does fit my dad's philosophy that the definition of a successful person is not just about how much money you make or the W's on in your column. It's about helping others. It's about acting on your heart.
Is there a phrase that you think embodies him?
I would say it is service above self.
A legacy that led him to receive the highest civilian award in the United States, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
His life is a testament that public service is a noble calling. We honor George Herbert Walker Bush for service to America that spanned nearly 70 years.
And that was President Obama. That was February 15th of 2011 when he